Now, 40 years later, President Biden just formed a commission to see if he should pack the court and make other changes to the judiciary. So what changed? Let's bring in our panel. Thane Rosenbaum is a distinguished university professor at Touro Law School and the author of Saving Free Speech from Itself. John Malcolm is a vice president for the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to you both. Professor, doesn't this smack of kind of eroding the concept, one, of checks and balances, or of the idea of three co-equal branches of government? I kind of feel bad for the court system. It's kind of getting beaten up on here by the executive and by the Congress, potentially. Your thoughts?
Tom, you know, the founding fathers wanted the judiciary to be independent from the two other elected branches of government. And make the court beholden to the Constitution and not to the people. So you're quite right. The spirit of this violates the separation of powers, the concept of judicial independence, co-equal branches of government. And so, yes, I mean, you know, clearly, and we've seen this before, the politicization of the court. Chief Justice Roberts has been very clear that he does not want the court to be politicized. He does not want the people to think that there are fixed ideological preferences within the Supreme Court. And by the way, Justice Breyer, a liberal justice on the Supreme Court, just recently said that he believes that changing the composition of the court violates the public trust, meaning that the public has a right to believe that the court makes decisions on legal principles and not on politics.
John, you have the members of the court are clearly opposed to this. I think even the liberal justices are opposed to this. Why go down this road anyway at this point?
For a very simple reason, which is the left is furious that President Trump got 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, and they don't like some of the opinions that the court is issuing. Joe Biden said in an interview last October that he thought the courts were out of whack, but he didn't say why they were out of whack. President Obama got to appoint 90 more judges than President Trump did. The Supreme Court, with the exception of 5 years during the Civil War in the 1860s, has been at 9 members since 1837. President Biden should have met Senator Biden, who said that this was a boneheaded idea, and it is. And it will do lasting damage to the court that will now be seen as manipulable by the two political branches of government and not as a co-equal independent branch, as Thane just described.
Well, you know, maybe in the president's defense, he may have forgotten that he said that. Professor, it seems that a lot of Democrats have spent a lot of time over the last few years, and this is to John's point, that Trump appointed judges that lacked judicial independence. Now, that's been proven to be nonsense if you look at the cases after the election that were heard by Trump-appointed judges. This commission is mostly judicial scholars on the left. So this all just appears very overtly political in nature. Would it be constitutional?
Tom, just to reinforce the point you just made, I have been on your show for months saying that the Democrats dodged a bullet with the Supreme Court, that this election for Joe Biden could have been overturned on constitutional grounds, Article 1, the Equal Protection Clause, but they didn't want to politicize the court. They wanted to stay away from the politics. So, you know, sometimes you get what you wish for. I'd be very careful. You're right. This is being driven by law professors and by progressives. And what's for progressives, in addition to what John said, which is true, is also a Green New Deal. So think about it. It's just like what you started your segment on, Franklin Roosevelt. You know, the whole point is that he needed more justices in order to not invalidate these progressive agendas. And I think that's exactly what is happening here. The good news is that this can't be done without congressional approval. So no matter what the commission comes back and says, if they give recommendations, although they're not mandated to give recommendations, Congress would still have to approve it. And this Congress, even the Democrats within the Congress, have no appetite for it, because polling shows that even the public is opposed to it.
Mm-hmm. The public is opposed to spending, you know, $5 to $7 trillion that we don't have either. But that didn't stop this Congress from doing that or proposing it. So, John, is the court? It's going to sound like an odd question, but again, we're dealing with supposedly co-equal branches of government here.
Right.
Is the court powerless here to sort of defend itself? Or what could they do to throw cold water on this? And again, we're not just talking about the Supreme Court. These changes could impact the entire federal judiciary.
Well, although the executive order that the president signed yesterday limits the commission to studying the Supreme Court, and you're right, the Supreme Court doesn't like it. Not only did Justice Breyer make these statements that Thane talked about last week, but shortly before she passed away, Justice Ginsburg said the same thing. But look, the courts are largely powerless. To answer your question about whether the commission could make these changes under the Constitution, if they are talking about term limits for Supreme Court justices, that they could not do. That would require a constitutional amendment. But if they wanted to change the number of justices on the Supreme Court, that they can do by congressional statute. And, Thane says that there's not much of an appetite for that. But the pressure from the left to pack the court has been and will continue to be intense. We have an evenly divided Senate, and if the Senate were to blow up the legislative filibuster, they might be able to persuade 50 Democratic senators, with a tie being broken by Vice President Harris, to pass legislation to increase the number of members on the court. That would be terrible, and I hope they don't do it.
Yeah, it is just a simple majority. It's not a 60-vote a 60-vote threshold to do this in the Senate. It's just a simple majority in order to be able to change the number, which is astounding to me. I don't think a lot of Americans fully appreciate how easy it could potentially be to change the numbers on the Supreme Court. Professor, the panel has 36 people. They're not going to offer specific recommendations, just kind of give an overall view of risks and benefits. So is this really just kind of a waste of time and a nod to the far left here on the part of Biden? Or do you think that certain things are going to come out of this?
I think it's a huge waste of millions of dollars. Clearly, the law professors are in favor of something that they're not even mandated to provide, right? Biden did not say, come back with recommendations on how I can pack the court. He didn't say that. He just said, as exactly what John just said, why don't you go back and do some risk analysis on what the implications are of reforming the court. But, they're agenda-driven. What concerns me is that Joe Biden, the moderate, is endlessly pushed by the progressives. And this is a very good example of it. Everyone who said, well, if you vote for Biden, you have a sort of protection against the more extreme elements of his party. But even something like this, which I think John and I think is largely symbolic and it would be a disaster, is a nod, is a concession, is appeasement for the progressive that simply from day one have been pushing a very different agenda. And it's not clear to me that Biden actually agrees with them.
John, I'll give you the last word. Do you think we'll see any changes either when it comes to the Supreme Court, or do you think that they will try some changes in the larger federal judiciary coming out of this tap dance that's going on in Washington right now?
I don't think we'll see changes at the Supreme Court. I do think you'll probably see new positions created for the lower courts. But I'll tell you what this commission is going to do. This commission is going to issue a report that is going to completely bash the current Supreme Court and try to undermine its legitimacy in order to rally support for future judicial nominations that this administration makes. And that will be terrible for the public's perception of the independence of the court and respect for the rule of law.
All right. Yeah, it's a big public relations game. Thane Rosenbaum and John Malcolm, as always, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.